Macomb College. We have Heather Rinkovich, who is our Director of Academic Advising here at Walsh. And then we have our student, Katie Berger here, who will be graduating this summer with her Bachelor of Accountancy. We're very excited for her. It's awesome. So, you know, when A4EOE asked me to host this, this was not the topic that was originally presented. And over talking with people, this is what we came up with. And out of it, I think we're going to gain a lot of insight and information. I was talking with Katie and Heather just a second ago, and my mind was kind of blown. I had no idea what happens kind of on the other side of the wall from where we are. But I'm glad these three are able to help, and I'm going to kick it off with this first question. Let's talk to our advisors for a second first. Can you tell us about what you do, what your daily routine is, what you go through with students, that sort of thing?
Is this on? Okay. So here at Walsh, with regards to disability services, so there's 3 of us who are in the advising department, myself and 2 licensed counselors that work with accommodated students. So it just kind of depends on where the student's at in the accommodation process. If they're new coming in, we're onboarding them, going through disability services packet that we created for our new students, medical documentation, establishing accommodations, and notifying faculty from there. If it's current students coming in to meet with us, talking about their current semester, what's working, what's not working, making sure faculty are accommodating them as they should, and fielding questions on the flip side too from faculty about accommodated students in their class. So,
yeah, we do most of the same stuff at Macomb. As a lot of the community college folks in the room know, we work with students who are coming from any number of different academic levels. So in community college, students don't have to have a high school diploma or a GED to take classes with us. So we're dealing with some students that are, I would say, at the lower end of the educational level, and then we have some high achieving students that are choosing to come to a community college to start their academic career. So our process is very much the same, working with students as they come in, reviewing documentation with them, talking with them about what accommodations have worked for them in the past in school, and then trying to create a plan for them to access the information in their classes. We also work with faculty and do some presentations to help faculty understand what our process is from the other side, like you said, the other side of the wall, what students experiencing, so that when they get to class they understand, the instructors understand where the student's coming from.
Thank you. Yeah, Katie, would you mind telling us about your experiences with online classes and working with advisors and counselors?
So far, working with advisors and counselors have been excellent, and that's mainly because I have the skills to self-advocate. A lot of times, students may not have the skills to self-advocate. My online classes sometimes can get a little bit stressful if professors open up things too fast, because I know a lot of professors like their students to work ahead, but if you open something too fast, I'll sometimes get overwhelmed thinking I have to get through all that in that week.
Okay. That's good. It's good information for everybody to have. So, Katie, let's piggyback on that a little bit. So you are a good self-advocate, right? Have you had to reach out to instructors to talk about that before, and how's that experience?
My experience is really well with reaching out to instructors. I always reach out to instructors. I usually beat out Walsh's notifications. So usually I get the same response of, if they're aware that there is disability services, I get the same response, and usually I'm like, I know that, I've done that already. I'm just reaching out to explain to you how my disability may affect me online or in my class.
Okay. And would you say that it's similar for other students who are in the same circles for you, or?
A lot of students, I feel like, don't want to express they have a disability, or don't even want to provide documentation sometimes. because they're afraid of the negative connotations or the stigma that might be attached to their certain type of disability that makes them from family or just what they view the public image of people with disabilities.
Yeah. I think one of the things we're trying to do more of too when we're onboarding or meeting with current students that have disabilities or have disclosed some sort of limitation, we really stress the importance of communication and sharing with their faculty, what they're comfortable sharing. We're limited on Lou and I on our end in sharing that information. We've got obviously FERPA, but we also have HIPAA coming into play and sole possession of over medical documentation. So, we're trying to really protect the students' privacy. So, we really try to work those students and get them to a place where they feel comfortable sharing what might impact them in the classroom with their faculty. So, and some are, like Katie said, some are really great advocates, especially here at Walsh. They've, kind of gone through at least 2 years over at the community college and have kind of gone through this process, hopefully already. But communication is really important for those that are willing to share. It helps everyone. So.
Thanks. Let me talk to Lou and Kate for a second. So Lou, since you are with Macomb, you get a lot of high school students coming in. And Katie and I were talking a little bit earlier about just that transition from high school to college. Can you share some experiences that you've had with students or things that you've noticed from that transition? I know high school has been kind of a topic today. So.
Yeah, one of the important things I think that we talk to a lot of students and even parents, we get a lot of parents that come in with their students as well. So one of the things that we try to educate them on is the differences between high school and college, and when it comes to accommodations, the types of things that we can provide in the college and the things that they were provided with in high school that are no longer part of that. So I can give some examples of that, and some people may have heard students asking about this in their classes, but some students that have had experiences in high school where they get extended time to do assignments is really something that they ask for quite a bit, and that's something that some push harder on than others, but the answer is always the same with us, is that's not really an accommodation at the college level, and the structure of the classes and the way they're set up are designed to give students the opportunity to complete the homework in the time that's allotted, for the class. So I try to put students at ease and tell them that, the way our classes are structured with a Monday and Wednesday format or a Tuesday and Thursday format, you're not going to be going to class 5 days a week and have an assignment Monday and have it due on Tuesday. But to me, that's where I would see extended time for homework or assignments to be of value to a student that's coming in. But try to put them at ease, telling them that that's not exactly the way it's going to be set up. The other thing about students coming from high school is that I try to explain to them and the parents that the high school is responsible for your success in high school. The law says that the high school and the K-12 system has to ensure your success here. So you'll have teachers and resource people that are checking on you, that are looking at your grades, that are identifying difficulties that you're having and addressing it with you from their standpoint. In college, we're not responsible for your success, although we want that. We're responsible for allowing equal access to the information, which is a little bit different than the ensuring your success. What that means is that the student has to identify when they're not having success in a course. They have to identify when they're struggling. And for some students, that's really a difficult thing to do because they've never had to really do that before. They've always had somebody else telling them, hey, you're doing poorly in this class, you need to come to the resource room, you need to do this or that. And in college, really a skill they have to develop is recognizing when they're not being successful and what to do about that. So those are a couple things that...
I want to comment, part of that has to do with the change of laws that happens when you switch from high school to college. In high school, you're covered under IDEA. Once you switch to college, you're covered underneath the American with Disability Act. The American Disability Act makes it more on the student themselves have to recognize when they're having the problem. Where IDEA is making sure you get your free and appropriate education when you're disabled.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a big transition too. Let's talk about that. Are you seeing any changes in the accommodations that you're giving, or an influx of more accommodations? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, here at Walsh, I would say our accommodations have definitely increased over the past few years, and a lot of that has to do with those unseen disabilities. So less on the physical disabilities and limitations. So more students coming in with IEPs from high school, different diagnoses under mental health and learning disabilities. So I would say the majority of our accommodated students are actually those with unseen disabilities.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A lot of students are coming in with non-physical disabilities that you would look at them and say, well, nothing's wrong with this person. Why
Right.
would they need an accommodation?
Right.
I was telling you guys earlier, my niece the other day, we were at a conference somewhere and she was with me, and she's a freshman in high school, and she was talking about, she always tells me that she's just really anxious. She's dealing with that. And we were listening to a speaker, and the speaker was talking about how social media has really increased the amount of anxiety that students have. And just at the high school level alone. And I thought, how is this possible? You're in ninth grade. Like, you got to worry about boys, and that's it. And she said, no, it makes it infinitely worse with social media, because now I know what I'm missing out on. And what do they call it?
FOMO.
FOMO, right? I had no idea this was a thing, right? But it explains this anxiety that is coming up and bubbling up within so many people. And I don't know if we're ready for all of that yet.
Yeah.
Within the academic system. I don't know if we know yet how to deal with it. Sounds very impersonal, but how to support students who are wrestling through that, I guess.
Yeah.
What would you say is the greatest pain points with higher ed for students that need support?
For all of us?
Sure. Katie can speak from experience.
Yeah.
One of the things I found from experience is colleges require current documentations. A lot of times, your primary insurance companies will not cover your testing because they consider a school issue and not a lifelong issue. For me, where the type of disability I have is going to be lifelong and affects me throughout my work career. If you're have a college student like me who's coming from the low income, they're not going to be able to afford those types if they need 1 or 2 tests. They can cost anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 to get a decent test.
Yeah, and I have several friends who are licensed psychologists that do different types of testing when it comes to learning disabilities, and I've actually reached out to them and asked about that testing because it is very expensive and a lot of insurance companies won't cover it. So if a student does have an IEP with a particular diagnosis, we will carry that forward here at Walsh, depending on when it was done and what the diagnosis was, just because we know of the costs associated with it, and or we have referrals for testing for students that have never been tested or need updated testing. We've developed relationships with psychologists in the area that will assist. But I would say, that and just getting the word out about services and encouraging students to, find us and making sure people know where to find us and
Right.
early notification. So.
Yeah, to the point you guys were talking about, I've recently been looking at some research about, some legal information about the type of documentation that students need to provide. And the Association for Disability in Higher Education has some guidance on documentation policies and things, and really what it comes down to and what his opinions say is that part of it is, part of the documentation can be written documentation from a medical professional or psychologist, psychiatrist, but a lot of the documentation that can be used is the interview with the student who is interested in receiving accommodations. And so to have a student jump through hoops and pay some large amounts of money to receive updated documentation of something that's already been documented is kind of a poor approach to serving students with
Agreed.
disabilities. And so even if a student comes in with an older type of documentation, usually that will substantiate that there is the presence of a disability. Now the conversation between the professional counselor and the student is, how does that disability impact your ability to access the information in college? And so we can talk with the student about the typical accommodations they received in high school, what are some of the things that worked for them, what are some of the needs that they feel like they're going to need in the college classroom, and then it becomes a conversation about what their needs are. And so this notion of having to pay for additional testing is something that I think we're looking at as being sort of a last-ditch effort. If a student has no documentation at all, then that may be something they're faced with doing. But if they have some type of document that indicates they have a history of having a disability, which is the way that the ADA refers to disability, is a history of having a disability, that may be opening the door to serve other students that may not have the resources to get updated testing.
Agreed. Yep. Very similar.
Katie, can you talk a little bit about how what your doctor says doesn't necessarily line up with what you need?
Yes. For me, getting the new documentation was quite helpful because when I was in lower grades, they didn't know about my type of disability. But a lot of documentations will have what doctors recommend, but a lot of times I don't use those because I know I won't use it. One of the things that they recommend for me is the recording of my lectures. I know I'm not going to spend the time to re-listen to a 2.5 or 4 hour lecture, so why would I record my lectures?
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what Lou was saying too, and around the conversations that we have with the student, and it's a holistic conversation. It's, what's worked in the past, this is what your doctor is recommending, or your physician. This is what you've listed. Now let's have an honest conversation around what's really going to work for you in the classroom. So, yep.
And does that translate differently online? Like, do you make suggestions based on some disabilities, which classes they should take online, on ground, hybrid?
Yeah, I mean, I've had students who've had like a narcolepsy or, they're this fear that they were just going to fall asleep in class. So some of those students who have regular like seizures and other medical issues that, maybe they don't want out there in the public like that. Students with social, maybe on the spectrum. Like that. Sometimes we would make recommendations, again, after having the conversation with the student on, what's worked and what hasn't. So we certainly don't want to put them in a situation where they're in a classroom and something happens and then, we're not there. It's maybe an evening class and our offices are closed and there's no one there to really advocate for them in that situation. So,
I've had students with ADHD that really find it helpful to take online classes.
Yeah.
They find the regular on-campus classes, the structure of it, the timing of it is just too rigid for their the way that they operate, and the flexibility of the online format allows them to manage it in their own way, the way that they want to time it out for the week and be able to accomplish their assignments. So
yeah.
sometimes they wouldn't parents or students may not think that online classes would be right for them because they have a disability and they just think the traditional on campus, this is what you need to do. But sometimes having that conversation about the possibility of taking an online class opens their eyes to some different ways of getting the information.
Yep.
Have you received any feedback from students on what they need more of in those online classes or less of?
Well, I think one of the things, like Katie was mentioning, is opening things too fast makes it really overwhelming for some students, because those classes, at least at Macomb, are already accelerated from our normal 16-week semester. A lot of online classes are 8 weeks long, and so they're already compressed and accelerated. So if there's a syllabus or a timing of the class that is controlled by the instructor, and that happens quicker than it needs to. Obviously, for some students, that's great because they can go ahead and get the stuff done ahead of time, but sometimes students with disabilities may find that to be overwhelming, that they have to get that stuff done even though it's not due for another week or so.
Yeah.
Katie, can you speak to that as well?
Yeah, like I said, it gets really overwhelming when instructors open online courses too fast. One of the accommodations that I actually receive for online things of videos is transcripts, and that can help me because I can miss like one word and it can throw the whole meaning of some of the lectures, so that can help me if I know I'm struggling with that lecture. I'll go and access that transcript and I mean, okay, so what am I missing here? And I can find that specific word that my brain misheard.
Advisors, what is the biggest struggle that you run into? Whether it's with students, with faculty, with the institution as a whole?
Just one? Well, go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm still processing which one I want.
It's gotten better here at Walsh. I would say when I first came on, the process was pretty, for lack of a better word, antiquated. So we streamlined a lot. We did a lot of training and cross-training with faculty, with staff, just to build more awareness, educate. We're working on some things for new faculty orientation, and just, again, building awareness, having really honest conversations with faculty around students who may be accommodated in their class, and again, the unseen disabilities. That was one of the things I struggled with coming in to Walsh and overhauling the disability services process was, getting some pushback initially from faculty, like, the student is doing fine. Like, I don't understand why they have accommodations, and trying not to get fired up about it. But, again, I think that's where we fall back on educating them and educating everyone around accommodations and disability services. And, I mean, it's federal law. It's compliance, too. So, we have our part, the student has their part, and we've talked a little bit about the differences between high school and college, and the student, having responsibilities now, and just reassuring everyone that, we're doing things that are reasonable, and the student has a responsibility, as does the institution. So,
I think in terms of online classes, for us, the accommodations are typically extended time on tests.
Same.
There are very few other accommodations that are used for that. The on-campus classes obviously have a much broader impact on the accommodations as well. One of the things that we try to do is have conversations with instructors on specific accommodations. Like, if we ask an instructor to provide an accommodation for a student and the instructor feels like that's not possible, then what is possible, right? There's a need from the student to receive this information in a different way. And I'm just a believer that there's got to be a way to do it, right? The student needs this. This is what you're doing. How can we get that information to the student so that they can access it. We're not asking the instructor to, to do backflips or anything, but there's got to be a way to make this work. And so,
Gotta be honest.
so I think some people fear that discussion. I think sometimes students fear that discussion as well. So
Katie's shaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's intimidating,
Nodding,
right?
yes.
You've got this instructor who's supposed to be this knowledge expert at the front of the room that's talking and or online that's giving very, strict, explicit instructions on what to do, and you're this student going, okay, well, that's not going to work for me. What am I supposed to do? And so a lot of our conversations in our office are to students that you need to come back and talk with us if you're having an issue in class where the accommodation is not working, or you think of something that might work better than what we've talked about here based on what your instructor is saying. So having an open door and having students really come back and talk to us about how that works. I can give a quick example if we've got time. I had a student that had kind of an acute disability. She was in the hospital for something. It was toward the end of the semester. She called me and asked me if I could reach out to her instructors and ask them to videotape their lectures so that they could, so that she could view them and then be able to maintain her courses and not have to withdraw from class. So of course my initial reaction is, oh God, really?
How am I going to do that?
Yeah, what am I going to do? So I'm like, well, I mean, that's a first step, right? You just email an instructor, ask if they're willing to do that, and if they are, great. If they're not, well, then what is a way that we can help this student that's in the hospital and is not going to be back for the rest of the semester? So she had 3 classes. I don't remember what the other 2 instructors said when I emailed them, but this math instructor said, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I'll set up a camera and I'll videotape them and I can email them to her. And no, you know what, better yet, I'll set up a YouTube channel and she can just subscribe to my channel and then she can just watch them. And then, so she did that. And then like the next semester rolled around and that instructor came to me and she's like, hey Lou, I've been videotaping all of my lectures for all of my classes and putting them on this YouTube channel, and students say they love it because they can go back and watch it. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess that's a great example of how, like, universal design is what they call it, right? You just design it so that everybody has access to it. So it was just a great example of how, an idea that originally I thought, oh my God, how are instructors going to react to this? One of them really latched onto it and thought it was a great idea. So.
And I like the fact that it doesn't have to be a closed door when we bring those issues to the forefront. It's a chance for everybody to brainstorm and figure out ways to make learning accessible to everyone.
It has to be.
Yeah. I mean, there is the by law part,
Right.
But then there's also, I mean, I'm sure this instructor felt amazing afterwards that she's doing this great thing for not only this one student, but for all of her students.
Cool.
It's changing education.
Right. And I think sometimes when we like we have these classroom assistance letters, I'm sure most folks have something similar. And I think sometimes when instructors get those, it's like, oh God, we have to follow this, like I don't want to do anything wrong, and I have to do this because it's the law, and like, these are just what we've come up with as an accommodation for this particular student, and if you have a better way to do it, I'd love to have a conversation about what's a better way to accommodate that student, right?
I've actually been, had instructors not know, because of how they run their class is a little different how things, so I'm willing to accommodate them with how they run their class with my accommodations. For one instructor, he just wanted me to make sure I had the quiet room, so I'm like, oh, okay, because he did a lecture before the quizzes and the tests, and so we're able to rent one of the rooms here if the testing center's closed, and I'll be able to do it that way rather than just going to the proctored testing exam. So I'm willing as a student, if I come to you, I'm willing to make concessions too, depending on how you teach.
Yeah, there's a math instructor that brought to my attention the fact that when a student in her class takes the math test in the Learning Center, they don't have the benefit of like comments that she might make during the test. If a student has a question about like one of the problems that was ambiguous, that student at the Learning Center would never know that. And so she would always say, I can provide a quiet testing environment for that student in the classroom, And so it was always, you need to have a conversation with that student, I can help facilitate that. If the student is okay with that, then we're all good. If the student says, no, I want to take it at the Learning Center and understands that they may be missing out on some certain details that you might provide during class, then that's a decision the student would have to make. But
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with having that discussion and changing it up.
That's good. We're almost out of time. I want to leave a couple minutes for Q&A as well, but how can faculty better help our counselors and advisors?
I fall back on the communication, and I think the faculty here have been, every semester I get questions. I'd rather faculty not assume anything. If they get our accommodation notification and they have a question, and this actually happens a lot with online courses, because when we send out our accommodation notifications to faculty, it gives a list of all the different accommodations the student gets. And if it's an online course, 9 times out of 10, it's just that extended testing time. They don't necessarily need a private room with a proctor. And some of the other accommodations, like a note taker or books in alternative format, are things we're taking care of on our side. So, faculty will reach out and be like, how am I supposed to do this? I'm like, no, it's good. You don't have to do that part. And we walk through it together. And then again, just being aware that, their students have unseen disabilities. We've got veterans in the classroom with disabilities. We've got students with mental health issues, with learning disabilities, and to just realize that, don't assume. And if you have questions, ask. So.
Yeah, I want our faculty to know that we're a resource for them just as much as we're a resource for the students.
Absolutely.
And I know Michelle Zeminski and I have worked together on a few students, maybe the same student more than once. But it's been great conversation back and forth about what we can do to help this student. And it's funny because sometimes students will tell me something that the instructor says, and then I know that's one side of the story, and I have and I'll tell them, I'm going to contact your instructor and talk to them about it, and then we'll reconnect and find out what's going on here. So it's important for us to keep in mind there's always two sides to the story, and they're never the same.
Yep.
And they're somewhere in the middle there. So hoping that faculty understand that we're there to help facilitate what's best for their class and what's best for the student.
Katie, how do you feel that faculty can best empower students in an online environment?
I'm going to say communication. Be realize that those students with a disability might not be willing to reach out to you when they're having trouble, or reach out to you just to discuss it, just because it's such a private matter. Be aware of the time. I've had instructors misinterpret my time and a half as double time. And I'm sitting there looking at a 7-hour test going, I don't need 7 hours to do this.
Mm-hmm. Over accommodating, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I want to open it up. Anybody has any questions, thoughts? Yes, please.
I have a student right now who can't hear me. So he's got someone typing out everything I say. And I've noticed that my lectures change slightly, right? Because you can't, every time I stop a sentence and not complete my sentence, I'm like, wait a minute, he's going to try to type that out. So I think this awareness of our lecture and typing out what we say is going to be good for us to lead our sentences in the first place. And then also, I just told him 2 days ago, I have over 100 videos online, and I have a YouTube channel, and afterwards, the two of them came to me and said, well, do you have a transcript? No, I don't, but she's going to now do that work to type out everything that I'm saying in the video. My next thing, it just happened a couple days ago, to see if Macomb or some company could maybe take some of the top videos and create it.
Yes, they will.
Yeah, there's companies out there that will provide transcripts. My question is, do you enable the closed captioning system on YouTube?
Well, then,
because it's not quite accurate, and I know that.
it's not knowing what you don't know. Just recently I went through this online repurposing of a class with Tom and Sandy over there, and they pointed out a couple things. All these videos, over 100,
I didn't even realize that some of them have the CC at the bottom. And they pointed out to me, wait a minute, this video doesn't have CC at the bottom. Well, while I was creating them, I didn't even know, right? That I could do that as an option, and now the awareness that I could do that. And then the other thing I learned just recently is I've been posting all the syllabi online, but I didn't run that check accessibility tool. I just recently learned about, and so I had to go through and kind of, I don't know, correct the errors through the online group, and I wouldn't have known to do that if I didn't, first of all, go through the training, or have students like yourself that come to me and say, it would be great to have this. And then you start rethinking the whole thing. Well, why am I providing a video online for the people that are teaching or taking the class online, but not providing it on campus? So then I started to post the same videos for the on campus. You know, it seems more fair, right? They only hear one lecture, well, the people online can hear it 100 times if they want to. So I'd like to find out more about transcripting, transcript the videos. Just Macomb.
There are definitely services out there. I know we use them, especially in specific courses that we know students are going to need it. So they are available at a cost, but by law, we kind of need to do it anyway, so it's money well spent. Pat, one more? One more?
What accommodation have you run across that may be easy to accommodate for on ground, but has been difficult online, and how did you handle it?
Well, I was just thinking of one, and then I thought, well, that was difficult to implement on campus as well. I'm working with a couple of blind students, and that's been really challenging with some course content that is online that is just by nature of the way that it's taught and the software that's used for it is just not really friendly for blind students. We had to hire somebody that was a sighted person to describe what was on the screen for this student. It was a networking class, and basically they had to click and drag different components onto the screen to create this network of computers and wires and all this stuff. And so the blind student did not have access to be able to demonstrate that or practice that or do that. So that was a really difficult one to do online.
All right, one more question.
Well, in a little comment, because I think as you were talking, I'm curious how many of us connect the two departments. Do PD for our faculty related to accommodating needs of students? It just feels like it's often a very like we're reaching out to the instructor who has a student who needs accommodation, and I wonder if there's value in doing a little bit more connection, and like you all said, contact us. And I think as faculty member, the faculty might not ever think, at least at our institution, to reach out and contact them. But one question I have, Lou, you mentioned a different kind of subset of people who might have an acute disability. They have a medical situation that is going to cause a temporary disability. They're going to be in the hospital. Have you run into issues where I have 3 classes and 2 of my faculty are doing it and 1 doesn't? So have you had those conversations, and do you feel like that's a faculty piece or a student piece as far as resolving the issue? And I'll just say I have some faculty who would say, well, it's my classroom to manage and here's our policy. Because they don't fall under ADA, but we're trying to service them with a temporary disability.
Well, I would argue that they would be covered under the ADA for that type of thing. I would certainly bring that to my boss's attention, and if they're not willing to do something like videotape a lecture or whatever, then how can they ensure access for that student for that class? Now, there would be other options, I guess, to do a medical withdrawal from the class and have to take it again, so that would be a way to rectify the situation, and then probably that's how that would resolve itself. But I think if an instructor wants to be proactive and wants to really help that student, there's definitely ways to do that. But I could see where an instructor would say, no, I'm not doing that. They're going to
Right.
have to medically withdraw and get their money back or get a voucher to take it next semester. And that's great, but that student put a lot of work into, all the way up to the 3/4 mark of the class. And now, to have to go a
Yeah.
whole nother semester and delay their graduation or their progress. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I think more and more we're being aware of servicing. I think getting our faculty to the focus on student success in general, and then focus on student success for people who may have different needs to be able to have that same access to success that another student would have.
Yeah.
And I think some of our more traditional faculty have a little bit harder time with that.
Can I'm going to comment on that for a second. The more you focus on general student success systems, you're going to catch those people with disabilities to be more successful that don't want to tell the school or don't want anyone to know.
That's a good point. All right, well, we're out of time. I want to thank our panelists.
Excellent, yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
That's a great panel discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Palmer, who's going to make the introduction. He's introducing me to make an introduction. And I first have to say that I didn't plan the agenda, but it's a little cruel to make